So I read a book called The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and I really liked it, which was a huge surprise for me, mostly because this is a genre that I never usually read. I think the last time I read a romance novel, I think it was probably 50 Shades of Grey, which I really didn't like for a number of reasons. And before that, probably Twilight, which I kind of liked but had a lot of issues with. On top of that is the fact that this is a gay romance, and obviously I'm by no means homophobic, but it was new, to say the least. Yeah, so I kind of put that aside when I was reading it, and I was like, oh, okay, so they're doing that, okay. God, I sound like such a prude. No, so I like this book because it's very well written. So Madeline Miller knows how to tie together really tight prose. So there's never a time when I sort of remembered that I was reading a book, or if that's kind of a weird thing to sort of hear. It's sort of what I mean is like when you're reading a really badly written book with like quite clunky prose, you sort of know that you're reading something that someone has deliberately written because it's just so uneven and it's just there's too much clutter in the prose and that sort of thing. This isn't like that at all. This is a really well written book. All the transitions between speech and between description and narration flow really well. So I definitely I noticed that and I enjoyed it. Another great thing as well is that, like I said before, so this is a romance between Patroclus, the Greek prince, and Achilles. So I think what she does really well is she develops that tension between those two characters really well throughout the story, and it's done quite slowly. You have to give this book about 6 or 7 chapters to really get going. She really draws out that sort of enticement between the two characters, so you don't really expect what happens to happen based on how, I don't want to spoil it, but how he originally sort of meets Achilles. One thing that she's really good at is she's really good at building the sexual tension into the prose, if that makes sense. So just like all these sort of stolen glances and how she describes the ups and downs of their relationship, particularly at the start, I think is really good. From all the people who I heard recommended this to me, and I think, Kristen, if you're watching this, I remember you tweeting about how you basically cried for days at how, I'm not going to spoil it, but how it ends, basically. And me being kind of like a guy with like a really like kind of metal heart of like, of no soul whatsoever, I was like, oh, okay, I knew that was coming straight away, and I was just like, I'm not like gonna cry or anything. I'm just like, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm a guy. I'm just like, I don't know, just some old man basically. I feel like this book is really good, but like really not written for me at all. Like I'm really not Madeline Miller's target market, and that's completely fine. It's like, if you love romance novels and if you really get a kick out of like building sexual tension and like uncertainty between characters, you're really going to love this book. Now this gets me to another one of the points that I didn't really like about the story. So I don't really like Patroclus. Patroclus to me was kind of like a kind of whiny, angsty teenager kind of character. I didn't feel like he was very proactive at all, and for me, like that is kind of a deal breaker with any main character. Like I said, I gave this a chance because I was interested in just seeing how they developed it. Like I knew obviously how the Iliad goes, the story, but I was interested to see how this plot thread worked and how it could conclude between these two characters. But with Patroclus, I felt that he, like I said, was just a sort of whiny, angsty teenager. He basically spends most of the start of the story just sort of moping about the fact that he's like not worth being king, and he's not worthy of his father's kingdom, and how he's not worthy of Achilles, and how he's not worthy of this and this and this. And it's like, dude, just like take some charge of your life and get your act together. That's just me being really like this like harsh, like soulless guy again. But that was just my honest sort of reaction to this character in the story. I had a similar thought when I read both Twilight and the more egregious example of 50 Shades of Grey. With Twilight, the main character, I didn't really understand why people liked her character so much. She was just very bland, like she didn't really do anything in the story, and she wasn't very interesting either. And I appreciate the fact that Stephanie Meyer made it so that anyone could put themselves into her shoes, and to do that she had to kind of make her almost like a blank slate, which is kind of good in a way. I can understand why she did that, but I feel like she didn't really give her much personality, and personality doesn't necessarily exclude people from putting themselves in her shoes, and she really liked it. And when I watched the film of Twilight as well, just how like how washed out her face is all the time. She just seems really unhappy. Never kind of takes initiative in the story. She's sort of there while the story happens to her, sort of thing. And obviously the same thing with Anna in 50 Shades of Grey. None of the characters in that story evolve at all because none of them really do anything. With 50 Shades of Grey, you have basically Anna dates this guy who's, I guess he's kind of interesting because he's a billionaire and he has his lifestyle. But when it quickly kind of turns out that he's actually like this really like insecure guy who just completely unself-sufficient and is kind of dangerous in a lot of ways, she still stays with him basically for no reason at all, apart from the fact that, he's maybe good in bed and like he's very rich. When I was reading that, I wanted some evolution from her, and for her to basically to recognize that like this is like a really like abusive relationship. I kind of got the same feeling with Song of Achilles between Patroclus and Achilles to kind of a lesser extent. I kind of give Madeline Miller a bit more credit than that. Patroclus sort of learns to become more proactive later in the story, and I find the sort of foil of Achilles and his sort of mirror of being this like heroic character interesting. But I found it interesting how there's sort of parallels between the Song of Achilles and stories like Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey, where you have this kind of quite mild-mannered character full of angst who's the main character, who the plot basically just happens to them, and they spend basically the entire story just sort of enticing this other character. So for Twilight, it was Edward, and I read it and I enjoy it. It's like, this is quite fun, but it's like I don't really like the main character that much, and I don't think this is a very good role model for people to be like. I feel like role models, protagonists should be like more, proactive, take charge of their lives. Maybe that's just me being a sort of curmudgeonly old man or whatever it is. So that's my quick thoughts on Song of Achilles. My grade for this story is a B, partly because, while I like the writing, I didn't really connect with the main character that much, and I thought he was kind of very angsty and reminded me of some other... Can't think of a word for unproactive, if there is a word for that. So if you have any thoughts on this book, please leave a comment below, like the video, and as always, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks guys, bye.